Okay, so the first thing I want to say is this is a boring alert. Beware, this is not meant to be entertainment, this is information, and so it's going to get incredibly boring if you're not into a 580. I'm just going to give you a full rundown on everything associated with Trekka. The light's not the best because it's the middle of the day, but it's the only time we got. So I'll just run it through, hopefully the audio's okay. So the first thing to talk about probably is why do I have a solid rail here on the back of the boat? It's because I like the security of the rail. It's one of my first things. It was no brainer. Most people have just a quarter push bits here and a wire or a rope across the back, but I like this rail because it just gives you a huge sense of security. You can hang things off the back, and one of my favourite positions during the sailing is actually to sit up here. I'm just brace sitting here, hanging on. If it's really rough, I'll be clipped on. Fantastic spot to be, so that's just why I put that rail. I'm not trying to save the ultimate weight on Trekka. It's all about voyaging safely, rather than be a flat out carbon fibre ultralight. This is a light displacement boat, not an ultralight boat. So same with the boarding ladder. Stainless steel boarding ladder is compulsory. You can't have any other type. This is a big one. Pitor put it on. It's bigger than I expected, but I was happy to do it because the best part about it is that you can use it when the boat's on the trailer with the keel on. And I don't actually tie it off. I leave that line hanging in there, and I just have a bit of light shock cord, but it just sits there by itself, and it went the whole way. Only on 2 occasions did it get pulled back, when I got laid over on the side and water pressure going past dropped it down. But it's easy to pull down if I'm in the water, and it is great having a solid ladder, even for cruising and stuff. But on the trailer it was surprisingly handy getting up and down on the boat. I've got obviously you've got to have life sling for safety. You've got to have a life buoy. I've got an inflatable life buoy here, Plastimo inflatable life buoy. This is my throwing line. It's a floating line, 20 metres long. You can throw it into the water. And some people ask, what's the point of having all this stuff if you're a single-hander? It's just that you might need to go alongside another boat and pull people off that boat to bring them onto your boat. So it's still a requirement for our safety gear and stuff. Now the Dagger Boards. These Dagger Boards or fins, they just push down. These are optional in the design. You can just push them into the water, and it does give you some directional stability. There's 2 of them. They're just running in guides there, and held in by a shock cord. You can see that shock cord there. We had some trouble with them with the Sargasso Sea, picking up weed, and they'd flip back and stuff. But overall, the interesting thing: are they valuable? Are the fish valuable for the design? It's not compulsory, as I say. And you can have any design on that. You can do whatever you want. I did quite a few tests on a couple of days to see if I could really define whether they're an advantage or not. It's not easy to prove that they are an advantage, but I think I'd feel funny if I didn't have them, because there's occasions with the boat where it is good to have directional stability. I think they interact in a negative way with the rudder sometimes, when you're being extreme, but I'll leave that up to the individual to decide. But at the end of the day, I think I'd rather have them than not have them, because there are situations where I'm pretty sure it was an advantage. Okay, with the rudder, you just see the rudder here is really quite free. It's very important that you can push the rudder even just with your little finger. It needs to be completely free so that the wind vane doesn't lose any sensitivity through tight bearings and stuff. And we all had good rudders in that sense. The wind vanes were going quite well. So I'm going to get on to the South Atlantic wind vane. Why did I choose the South Atlantic wind vane for Trekka? The bottom line is I've been involved with wind vanes now for about 45 years. My first was a Navic. I was then selling Aries for decades in Australia. I was the Aries agent for a long time, and Aries are a really good vane. I've then sailed under all sorts of other vanes, monitors and all sorts, so I understand wind vanes. With this one, it's basically a takeoff of a wind pilot. And the guy's been marketing it for some time. I looked at it, and the first thing is it's reasonably light. The whole package is about 13 kilos, and it's a servo pendulum system, which is very efficient and fast, which is efficient, fast and powerful for a fin keel boat with an outboard rudder to give it plenty of control. And I knew it would be more than powerful enough to steer the boat. And it looked really solid with all the castings and all the rest of it. I knew the principle worked, so I just went with it sight unseen, basically. I was very happy with what I saw. The manufacturer's been very receptive to everything we've been saying about the Vane. and I've been saying it'll get a 580 around the world, and I really believe it will. However, there's no question you would be doing a major service on the unit after each of the 4 legs. Okay, because within that there's a few little things. A simple example, I'll say, this lead counterbalance corrodes onto this tube within days. You know, I greased it and it was still corroded, and then you can't move it up and down. And it's a counterbalance for the flip-flop vane, you know, and the vane actually is the course corrector for the wind vane. When the vane flops down that way, it either flops or it flips when it goes. For those that don't know how they work, there's a conrod here that goes down, and you'll see when that flips and flops, if you look at the servo rudder in the water, the servo rudder is actually turning. Now that's not steering the boat, because it can actually then paravane up to the surface when it turns, and when that moves up to the surface, either left or right, it's actually pulling these ropes here over to pulleys on the side, which are directly connected to the tiller here, and that's what steers the boat. You can see that happening in some of the videos I've already let out on Trekka. So the principle is very simple. Etienne was the first one to really sort it out on the boat in terms of where to put the pulleys and where they should be mounted on the tiller, and you know, passed the information on. I basically copied Etienne, and the unit worked straight up first time. This first 600 miles to Lanzarote, didn't miss a beat. It's fantastic. And then since then we've discovered a few little things, and we're working with the manufacturer on this. Their bearings tend to be a little bit loose in here. I swapped mine out for a tighter pair in Lanzarote, and that made it a bit better, so that was okay. I made a mistake when I put back a grub screw on the conrod. It was meant to go in with Loctite, and I used anti-seize, so it unscrewed itself, which was my fault. I fixed that in Lanzarote. Some of these fittings here, some of these engineering sort of universal joints are a little bit floppy now after about 4,000 miles. So as I say, we're working with the designer and the builder of these vanes, and he's really happy to have us trying out the vanes. So we just did five boats, you know, 4,000 miles. All the owners, we're all happy with them. Misha said he had a few problems, but I think that might be personal issues, because I looked at his boat here after 3,000 miles. I said, what's wrong with it? And he showed me, the bearings are floppy, but he assembled it and took off again, and I couldn't find any defects in it at all per se. So operator understanding of how a wind vane works is really critical. You've got to understand how they work and all the little sensitivities, because for instance, if I with the wind vane here, if I want to make it more or less sensitive, you just put it back and forwards. Okay, so if it's back, it's less sensitive. If it's vertical, it's maximum sensitivity. If you have it forward into the wind, it goes crazy, so you shouldn't do it. Same with the servo blade. I noticed when Misha arrived, his blade was actually tilted forward, so that would have made it too sensitive, it would have hunted. So there's little things you can adjust the sensitivity, like the gain on an autopilot. You know, you can play around with all that. But generally, this is a cool vane for 580s. Bulletproof. These cut us a great deal. The price is right, including a bracket. I had to put a longer shaft on mine because I was the first one to mount one, and the bracket was too high. And rather than drop the bracket, he sent me a longer shaft, and it goes from there. So I would say my initial idea of the boat, of the South Atlantic wind vane, as being right for this boat. It is. There's other vanes that'll do just as good a job, and there's always the interesting issue. We say at the moment that you must have, under class rules, a commercially available wind vane. Okay. We may change that, because in hindsight, one of the most efficient self-steering systems you can do on an outboard rudder boat is actually to put a trim tab on the back of the trailing edge of the rudder, okay, and then if you can make an efficient linkage here with a flip-flop vane, it drives the boat really well with a trim tab. But the issue is making an efficient flip-flop vane that has a good simple linkage to the back of the rudder, so that it's all working while the rudder's moving. And I'm not sold on that yet, but looks like there'll be some people working on that in the next number of 6 months or so. And if it looks good and they build a prototype and it's so on, we may approve that as well. We'll wait and see. So as I say, this South Atlantic vane is not compulsory for the 580s, but at the moment there's a lot of 580 owners have bought them, and I'm quite okay with the unit. When we look at these little adaptations and little suggestions to the manufacturer, he's probably going to follow up on that, and it's still a good deal, but it's an individual choice. But one thing's for sure, This vane did all the work for me. It was crazy. When I wanted to go fast, I would hand steer, because a wind vane is slewing around. The course changes like this, but if you hand steer, you're going straight lines. So if you want to go fast, you've got to hand steer more, which is okay. In heavy weather, this steered the boat in no sails up at all, bare poles in 30-35 knots for a whole night. It's perfect. In heavy weather with just a jib up, the only time a wind vane starts to let you down is when you've got your spinnakers up and things like that. So the apparent wind on board is low, but the boat speed is high. The apparent wind is what causes the flip and flop. So if that's low, you're not going to get good course sensing, and if the boat speed is high, it tends to woohoo. So then you've got to think about your electric autopilot or hand steering. But if you just want to get rest and you don't want to steer the boat, it'll still do it in nearly every condition that I encountered for the whole trip. So that's a big safety factor, and it's the reason I'm concentrating on this is because one of the original priorities to the design of the boat, being a displacement boat, that's a boat that sits in the water rather than on it, is that it's got to be able to be driven by a wind vane. That way you don't need huge amounts of electricity, you don't need spend lots of money on fancy autopilots. In fact, we don't even allow that. We just say it's got to be the smallest autopilot of the range. We're going to change that now to be approved autopilots, because one of the guys bought a very sophisticated tiller pilot, which is very expensive. Yes, it was potentially more reliable, but we don't want people to get hung up on power and electric autopilots. They're an aid, but it should be a wind vane thing. So because you can go forever on a wind vane, it's easy. So we've still got a few little things to do on this, but yep, I still think this is the right vane for the 580. Our electric outboard situation, I haven't got the battery pack on here, but this is my e-propulsion, and it's fantastic. Okay, it's a 1000 watt, equivalent of about 3 horsepower. We had e-propulsion as well as torpedo. Etienne had a torpedo, and generally 1000 watts is right. We say it's got to be maximum of 1000 watts. We're going to change that now for a couple of reasons. We're going to say it has to be maximum 1000 watts, but we might say it's got to be an approved outboard. Not for the brand, but for the size. Jim had an electric outboard. Not sure about the battery capacity. It was a Chinese one, not a proprietary, not a big brand name. It was quite inexpensive, but it's a problem when you arrive in port and you've got to get a tow, and that's not on, because we all got to be independent, and so we'll pay a bit more attention to that. You'll see some changes there, but everyone will have to have at least 1000 watt motor, and a battery capacity has to be a certain minimum, so that you can get out to start lines and you can get yourself in at the finish. The beauty of this boat, even when I came into the finish here in Antigua with the e-propulsion, I came in, I had my sail, I'd sailed it right into the bay here, I dropped my sails, and just as I did that, as I turned the corner into the channel, I had a big bullet, just a normal trade wind, but it was 25 knots and there was a bit of windage on my sails, and I'm heading into the wind, and it took a while to get a momentum up, and then the bow fell away, and next minute I'm heading out of the channel towards a reef, and I had to come up here and turn the outboard like a thruster to get going. So if it's big winds, 3 horsepower is not a lot, so you're better off sailing, and that's what Pete did. When Pete arrived, he sailed up the first bit, and then he had his outboard, and you can tack these boats really easy. So you got to remember the outboard is for assistance at the last minute, but it's important. It's a good outboard, especially for the round the world race. That's why it's going to be important. But yeah, I'm happy with my e-propulsion. In fact, it's perfect because I can recharge it at sea, right, using the water power. The only problem I had is my outboard bracket lost a pin, and I can't lock it down in reverse. So you can imagine if you're in reverse and you can't lock the bracket down when you lower it, the outboard wants to kick up, which is not a problem. You don't have to use reverse for mooring, but if I wanted to recharge the battery, it was a problem. So I could have actually used the outboard in the calms we had at the beginning to move to areas of more wind, because you could see it on the surface. But in the end, my outboard bracket let me down a little bit, so I didn't actually get to use that feature. But I had 65% battery capacity here when I came in, which was fine, and all was good. So a couple of things on the back here. This is, some people call this illegal, but I don't believe it's illegal. It's a red flashing strobe with a photo cell in it, and it's got 7 LEDs around the side. It's from a long line fishing pole, the market buoys that they put out at sea. Very inexpensive, 2 batteries go in it. And the reason is at night time when I'm running, I've got my masthead tricolour light on, and I have this on at deck level. It's incredibly bright, just blinking red light, and it's an eye attractor. Sometimes the white light, if there's a ship coming up astern, might be confused or not see the white light. This red blinking light will do it. So this is my extra bit. 2 batteries in there will last nearly 3 weeks. 2 torch batteries, and I just have that running and pull it down later. This is a floodlight, big white floodlight over the whole boat. Okay, so if there's anything going on and I need to see it from down below, I can flick a switch down below, lights up the whole boat, all the sails, all that sort of stuff, and I just find that quite cool. Also for filming, but I didn't get my big cameras going, so that's another one. The solar panels, I've only got one solar panel mounted here, and it's fully flexible. I'll just undo it here, and you can see pretty much like everyone else is doing. You can I'll just get this off here. I told you to be boring sometimes. Okay, so I can pull this around wherever I want. This is a 50 watt panel, and I've got a 75 watt panel. No, this is 55, and I've got a 75 watt panel mounted on the deck. The thing is here, it's interesting because I know from my BOC experience that anything you have on the back of the boat that's sticking out the side, when you get laid over and you slew around, you're going to wipe it out. And when I saw Pete's solar panels in Lagos, when he came, he's got 200 watt solar panels on the back of the boat. I thought they're not going to last the distance, and they didn't. One got wiped off the back because the boat is on its side sometimes when the boat's moving. So you don't want anything at the back of the boat that goes beyond the side of the boat. In fact, it should even be a bit in from that. So he's got his 2 panels there. Now that won't cut it in future. We gave him a dispensation for this one. The rule says that you must have at least one 50 watt panel that's mobile, okay, that you keep down below and you only bring out on certain occasions and plug it into the system. The reason for that is that everything could get wiped off the back and you lose your power source. So it's like an emergency. So in future you will absolutely only be able to mount 150 watts of solar panels, and the rest you'll need a 50 watt mobile down below. When we got the rails done, this pole wasn't meant to be angling back, because if I wanted to put this boat in a 20-foot container now, I would have to cut that off because it's extending too far back, which is a pain. And I only wanted it 30 centimetres up because I can easily sit underneath that, and you don't need it too high. You've got to be careful it doesn't interact with the wind vane. Pete had some issues with that as well. Every night when I wasn't using it, I used to just set this up level like that to stop it interacting with the vane, even when the wind's coming on the back, so you think it doesn't interact. But if that's there, it's affecting the wind even further forward. So it was a nightly ritual to put it flat and let the wind go past it. The wind vane doesn't hit that in any conditions, so it's fine, but that's a consideration. My life buoy is an inflatable one. It's a Plastimo inflatable life buoy. It got blown off once by a wave, so that's pretty cool. The tiller here has a short, excuse me, has a short tiller extension, which I was always wondering, is it too short, is it too long? In the end, it turned out to be just right. It's only 60 centimetres, but for me, the way I sail the boat, it's perfect. I can sit here, hang on to that. When you're sitting here, like this, it doesn't matter. Most of the time I'm sitting at the back there, but I can still sit up the top here. It's a bit. So yeah, 60 centimetres for me was perfect. You'll see the way Misha sails his boat. He's hanging off the side here way back, and he needs a much longer one. But for me, this 60 centimetres was fine. This was the takeoff for the electric autopilot, and there's an interesting thing here. If you look on this side, the pilot, you all know how they work. The pilot drops in here. In that plug hole, and then it comes out across and sits in the tiller. I plug it into this plug point here. Okay, that's where the power is in on the side. And one thing you want to do, I didn't do it yet, but one thing you want to do when you're not using the autopilot, you might use it for an hour or take it off for 2 hours, put it back again. You need secure storage for it in the cockpit. So what you need to do is just have a shock cord clip here and a hook, so you can just have it sitting there, leave it plugged in, because the less you plug and unplug, because a wave might come over as you're doing it, the better. But you need to put the pilot there with a shock cord and hold it so it doesn't get thrown around. Otherwise, you get laid over and it drops down the side. So I'd recommend a shock cord there. The other thing with the wind vane, you have to attach these 2 steering lines here. So these are the 2 lines. And there's a couple of ways you can do it. It comes with a little chain and so on. But even going back to my Navic days, I used a system here where the lines just go straight into jammers like that. and it locks it up, and you can kick helm in it the same as a chain. So you'll sort out different ways to attach your steering lines to the tiller, but this works well for me. And just for safety, to stop it slipping, I used to just wrap the lines around this bracket here for the autopilot. It's easy. You need a knife, as a part of the safety regulation. You need a knife somewhere in the cockpit, so I put mine on the tiller here. Another interesting one. Guess what's in this bag? Guess what's in that bag? That's the Race Rules rope and chain for your anchor gear. It doesn't take up a lot of space. It's quite heavy. I've got extra chain in there, but that's 25 metres of 12mm rope and the required chain. So it's easy to stow, and you can decide where you want to put it later on. It's not a lot. This bag here is actually got 100 metres of 12mm line in it. That's my storm warps. I pulled them out in the big windstorm I had in heading towards Lanzarote that time, but I didn't use it. I hate putting them out, a lot of work and stuff, and in the end did some other things. But just to show you the volume, and I store them in dry bags like this, which is really simple because you can put them in a locker and pull them out. The end's got a big rump of red spinnaker cloth inside, so you can find it. Here I've got it set up so that you open the bag. And everything's ready to go. I've got this rope here shackled on, they're tied on rather, so it's untied. I've got the swivel there ready to put on the anchor. I'll show you where the anchor is later. It's tied on the side up in the forecastle. So I stow this under the cockpit here at the back beside the life raft because it's quite heavy. So that's cool there. This is a cool little thing. I did a copied another boat, just have a storm board here in the cockpit. I don't know whether you can see that. And it means you can hold water back here, put your bucket in, you can just put junk in there and it doesn't move forward. If you don't want it, you can just slide it out. It's just a bit of plywood with a channel section there. One thing you absolutely must do is the two cockpit drains here in the corners. You're going to need to put some flapper valves in there, like a bit of rubber or a bit of vinyl or something with a metal top, so that the water breaking on the back of the boat doesn't come up the drains and into the floor of the cockpit. It was an absolute pain in the ass because it's not dangerous and you're not talking huge water, it's just dribbles of water would come up and flow through, so you always have wet feet. So in the end, I end up taping them up with duct tape. And if there's any big blow and it's coming through, then you just take the duct tape off and you've got normal drains and wet feet. But for 90% of the time, you've got a dry cockpit if you get rid of those ones. I always left the big 4-inch one, 10 centimetre hole in the back open. But yeah, you want to do that. That's very, very important. Okay, so the next one. Let's talk about one of the most impressive things about this boat is the SeaDek deck tread. Okay, that's this grey stuff here. And some of you may remember who joined the whole following a long time ago. I said to everyone, I said, look, if there's one thing you can do to your boat, get this SeaDek deck tread because it's going to change the boat completely, right? And no one did. And what happened when all the guys who turned up in Lagos, when they saw Trekka and saw the deck tread, and they looked at what they had, they've all said they're going to strip their decks and they're going to get the SeaDek on. The reason it changes the nature of the boat is if you, first of all, bring the camera over and get a close-up of this. This is the deck tread. It's really soft, right? You might be able to, I don't know whether you can see that. When I push it down, it's incredibly soft. It's got all these little pimples on it. So it's absolutely 100% effective non-slip. You cannot slip on this deck tread. But you put your knees on it and crawl on it, and it's really soft. It's just unbelievable. And you can, I'd sit on the cockpit here without any cushions or anything like that for 8-12 hours at a time. First of all, your bum's not slipping. Your clothes stick if you've got clothes on, and you'll slip inside your clothes. But it's super non-skid. So when the boat takes a big puff or a luff, you're not sliding around, and it's great on your feet. But most of the time when you're going forward, you're crawling. And so it's cool. I mean, Pete had vicious non-skid paint on his deck. It was wearing out his pants, and he got all sorts of rashes and stuff. And Etienne just had sand in the paint. And Misha, I don't know how he did it. His foredeck was really slippery. And so it's SeaDek. Now, they all keep telling me, I know SeaDek is available in Europe, but to the best of my knowledge, this particular product of SeaDek is not available in Europe, right? It comes from America, SeaDek. The SeaDek you see all through Europe looks similar. It's an EVA foam, but it's very hard, and it's on lots of outboard boats and runabouts, and you see it everywhere, but it's not the same. It's really hard, so you put your knees on it, and it's not quite as soft. And this is a peel-back sheet. It's 1 metre by 1 metre by 2 metres by 1 metre is the sheets. It cost me about €700 or something. No, 500 or 600 euro to do the whole boat and inside the boat, and it's the best thing you can ever do. It's heat, temperature insulation, sound insulation, but it's just the best non-skid. So really look into that. I'll put another post up about that before. I have no connection with them, no sponsorship, no nothing. I've just used it for the last 30 years on all my boats, including in Antarctica. You know, the last boat I had was, well, not the last one, the one before that. Ice is a big steel motor sailor. We had 8 years on it, and it was as good as the day we put it on. And it means you can just paint your boat, right? Paint your boat nice and shiny, all done, and then you can just put this stuff down, cut out cardboard templates, cut them out, peel them back, stick it down, and you've got a beautiful finish. So I cannot recommend SeaDeck enough, but only that particular type, because SeaDeck have lots of different products. So I'm harping on about it, but I just know anyone that does it, you'll think, oh, geez, Don was right. Oh, it's fantastic. You know, it really is that good. Okay, so I think, how long have we been going? 25. I think I'll just wrap that there because you're probably getting a bit bored, and then I'll start up another one and go a few bits about the running rigging. Oh, actually, yeah, and I'll start off with the Dodger. This is my favourite best friend. So see you again later on. Bye-bye.